Security, we have a situation. Victoria Sterling's voice trembled as she spoke into her earpiece. The black visitor had been casing her gallery for 30 minutes, taking photos, studying each painting intensely. She was certain he was planning the heist of the century. She had no idea she was watching the most celebrated mystery artist of the decade. Marcus Williams stood before the centerpiece of the Sterling Gallery's autumn exhibition, a breathtaking oil painting titled Urban Symphony No. 7. The 6-foot canvas depicted the raw beauty of city life through abstract geometric forms, each brushstroke telling a story of struggle, hope, and triumph. The price tag read $3.2 million, making it one of the most expensive contemporary pieces ever displayed in Manhattan. What Victoria Sterling couldn't see from her marble desk across the room was the single tear rolling down Marcus's cheek. After 15 years of painting under the anonymous pseudonym M.W., he was finally seeing his masterpiece displayed in the most prestigious gallery in New York City. The recognition he'd dreamed of since childhood was happening, but he couldn't claim it without losing everything he'd worked for. "Ma'am, should I approach him?" crackled the voice of security guard David Chen through Victoria's earpiece. David had been watching Marcus for the past 10 minutes, noting how the man seemed to study not just the paintings, but also the security cameras, the exits, and the layout of the room. Victoria adjusted her diamond necklace nervously. At 52, she had built the Sterling Gallery into a $200 million empire. Through shrewd business decisions and an eye for talent, she prided herself on being able to spot trouble before it started, and everything about this situation screamed danger to her. "Not yet," she whispered back. "Let him make his move first. I want to catch him red-handed, planning this theft. The insurance company will need solid evidence." Marcus pulled out his phone and took another photo of his painting. To Victoria, it looked like criminal reconnaissance. To Marcus, it was a moment of overwhelming pride and bittersweet joy. He zoomed in on his signature, the tiny M.W., hidden in the bottom right corner, where only he would know to look. The painting held memories that rushed back like a flood. He'd created Urban Symphony No. 7 inches during the darkest period of his life. 3 years ago, when his father had been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. The abstract forms represented the chaos of that time, the hospital visits, the financial strain, the sleepless nights wondering if his art could ever provide the life his family deserved. Each geometric shape told a story. The bold red triangles symbolized anger at the unfairness of life. The soft blue curves represented hope that somehow everything would work out. The golden spirals embodied the dreams he refused to abandon, even when creditors were calling and his father was slipping away. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he stood, a 38-year-old black man from Detroit's East Side, whose artwork now hung in the same gallery that had once refused to even look at his portfolio. When he'd applied as an unknown artist 12 years ago. Back then, Victoria Sterling herself had told him his work didn't fit the sophisticated aesthetic of her establishment. That rejection had been devastating. Marcus had spent 3 months preparing for that meeting, carefully selecting his best pieces, rehearsing his presentation. He'd worn his only suit, polished his second-hand shoes until they gleamed, and arrived 30 minutes early. Victoria had given him exactly 7 minutes, glanced dismissively at his portfolio, and pronounced his work interesting, but not quite what we're looking for. The coded language hadn't been lost on him. Not quite what we're looking for was art world speak for not the right kind of artist for our clientele. It was the same phrase he'd heard at gallery after gallery, rejection after rejection. "Excuse me, sir." The voice belonged to Rebecca Martinez, the gallery's assistant curator. She approached Marcus with a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I couldn't help but notice you've been admiring our centerpiece for quite some time. Are you particularly interested in contemporary abstract work?" Marcus turned to face the young woman, recognizing the tone immediately. It was the same carefully polite voice he'd encountered countless times, the voice of someone trying to determine if he belonged in an upscale establishment. "You could say that," he replied calmly. "I have a deep appreciation for this particular artist's work." "Oh, wonderful. Rebecca's smile became more genuine. MW is absolutely fascinating. Such a mystery though. No one knows who he really is. Some say he's European, others think he might be from California. There's even a theory that MW might be a collective of artists rather than a single person. The anonymity adds so much intrigue to the pieces, don't you think? Marcus had heard all the theories about his identity over the years. Art critics and collectors had crafted elaborate stories about MW's background, each more fantastical than the last. Some imagined him as a reclusive European aristocrat. Others pictured a Silicon Valley tech mogul who painted as a hobby. A few romantic souls believed MW was a tragic figure, painting from exile in some remote location. None of them had ever considered that MW might be a black man from Detroit who'd learned to paint in community center classes and had worked 3 jobs to afford art supplies. I've heard various theories, Marcus replied carefully. What's your opinion on why an artist might choose to remain anonymous? Well, Rebecca lowered her voice conspiratorially. Between you and me, I think it's brilliant marketing. The mystery makes the art more valuable. Plus, let's be honest, the art world can be quite particular about certain things. Sometimes anonymity allows the work to speak for. The last sentence hit Marcus like a physical blow. Rebecca had unknowingly articulated the exact reason he'd hidden his identity for 15 years. In a predominantly white elite art world, Marcus Williams from Detroit would have faced barriers that MW never encountered. He remembered the exact moment he'd decided to adopt the pseudonym. It was after his 15th gallery rejection in 6 months. The gallery owner had been more direct than most. Your work is technically proficient, but our collectors prefer artists with more traditional backgrounds. That night, Marcus had stared at his paintings scattered around his cramped apartment and made a decision. If the art world couldn't see past his background to appreciate his talent, he would remove that barrier entirely. He would become MW initials that could belong to anyone, anywhere. From across the room, Victoria Sterling watched the interaction with growing suspicion. David, he's talking to Rebecca now. This could be part of his plan, getting information from staff members about security protocols. David Chen, a former police officer who'd worked gallery security for 8 years, was beginning to have doubts about Victoria's assessment. Ma'am, he seems genuinely interested in the art. Maybe he's just an enthusiast. David, I've been in this business for 30 years. I can spot a criminal from a mile away. That man has been systematically photographing every piece in this room, studying our security system, and now he's pumping our staff for information. We need to act before he comes back with a team. Victoria's paranoia wasn't entirely unfounded. The Sterling Gallery had been the target of an attempted theft just 2 years earlier. A sophisticated team had spent weeks casing the gallery, studying security patterns, and identifying the most valuable pieces. The plot had been foiled only because one of the team members had been caught on a traffic camera during reconnaissance. Since then, Victoria had been hypervigilant about suspicious behavior. Unfortunately, her definition of suspicious had been influenced by biases she wasn't even aware she possessed. Meanwhile, Marcus had moved on to examine another of his paintings. Smaller piece, titled Reflections of Yesterday, priced at $1.8 million. This one held special meaning for him. He'd painted it after his mother's death, pouring his grief and memories onto the canvas. Seeing it properly lit and professionally displayed brought back a flood of emotions. The painting depicted fragments of memory, abstract representations of his mother's hands as she braided his sister's hair, the warm glow of their kitchen window during Sunday dinners, the faded photograph of his grandmother that sat on their mantelpiece. Each element was rendered in his distinctive style, geometric forms that somehow conveyed deep emotional truth. His mother, Dorothy Williams, had been his first art teacher. She couldn't afford formal lessons, but she'd bought him sketchbooks and cheap watercolors, encouraging him to draw everything he saw. "Baby," she'd say, "God gave you eyes that see beauty where others see ordinary. That's a gift you need to share with the world." Dorothy had died of complications from diabetes when Marcus was 28, just as his art was beginning to gain recognition under the MW pseudonym. She'd never known that her son had become successful. Never seen his work displayed in galleries. Never experienced the pride of watching him achieve his dreams. "That's another MW piece," Rebecca said, following him. "Completed just 3 years ago. The emotional depth is incredible, isn't it? You can almost feel the artist's pain and hope intertwined. I've stared at this painting for hours, and I discover something new every time." "Yes," Marcus whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You can definitely feel the artist's pain." Rebecca noticed his reaction and softened her tone. "Are you all right, sir? I'm sorry if I'm bothering you. Sometimes I get carried away talking about the art. My colleagues say I'm too emotional about the pieces. But I believe art should move you, you know?" "No, you're not bothering me at all. I'm Marcus, by the way." He extended his hand, struck by Rebecca's genuine passion for art. It reminded him of his own younger self. The wide-eyed kid who'd spent hours in the Detroit Institute of Arts, dreaming of seeing his own work on those walls someday. Rebecca Martinez, assistant curator. "It's nice to meet someone who truly appreciates fine art. Are you an artist yourself?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Marcus had dreamed of this moment, being able to claim his work, to receive recognition for his talent. But revealing his identity would mean losing the protection that anonymity provided. It would mean facing the art world as a black man from a working-class background, carrying all the prejudices and assumptions that came with that reality. "I dabble," he said finally. The understatement of his career. "Well, if you're interested in developing your skills, I teach weekend workshops here at the gallery. Basic techniques, color theory, composition. Nothing too advanced, but it might be helpful for someone just starting out." Marcus almost laughed at the irony. Rebecca was offering to teach painting techniques to the very artist whose work she spent her days studying and analyzing. But her offer was genuine and kind, made without any knowledge of who he was or what he'd accomplished. "That's very generous of you," he replied. "What made you want to teach?" "I believe art should be accessible to everyone, not just people who can afford expensive private lessons. Some of the most talented artists I've met were completely settled. They had a vision and found a way to express it, regardless of their formal training." Victoria Sterling had heard enough. She pressed her earpiece. "David, I want you to approach him now. Tell him the gallery is closing early for a private event. I want him out of here while we decide our next move." David reluctantly approached Marcus and Rebecca. "Excuse me, folks, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we'll be closing early today for a private showing. I'll need to ask you to finish up your visit." Marcus nodded politely. "Of course. Thank you for accommodating my extended stay." He turned to Rebecca. "It was wonderful talking with you about the artwork. Your passion for art is inspiring." "Wait," Rebecca said impulsively. "If you're interested in MW's work, you should know we're having a special exhibition next month featuring 10 of his pieces. It's going to be the largest collection of his work ever displayed together. The opening reception is invitation only, but I could probably arrange for you to attend if you're genuinely interested." Marcus felt his heart skip. 10 of his paintings in one exhibition, it would be a career-defining moment for any artist. The fact that Rebecca was offering him an invitation to his own exhibition opening added another layer of surreal irony to the situation. "That sounds incredible. Will the artist be attending?" Rebecca laughed. "That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? No one even knows how to contact MW. All transactions go through a lawyer in Chicago, who refuses to reveal any details about his client. It's like he's a ghost. Some people think he's dead, and his estate is just releasing previously unknown works." "What do you think?" Marcus asked, curious about how the art world perceived his mysterious absence. "Honestly, I think he's probably just a very private person who values his anonymity more than fame. In today's world, where everything is public and everyone wants to be a celebrity, there's something appealing about an artist who lets his work speak for itself." As Marcus walked toward the exit, Victoria Sterling emerged from behind her desk. She was an imposing woman, dressed in a tailored Chanel suit, her silver hair pulled back in a perfect chignon. Everything about her screamed wealth and authority. Diamond earrings caught the gallery's subtle lighting, and her Hermes handbag sat precisely positioned on her antique desk. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice carrying across the gallery with the commanding tone of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "I don't believe we've been properly introduced." Marcus stopped and turned around, immediately recognizing the woman who had rejected his work 12 years earlier. She looked older, more polished, but her eyes held the same calculating coldness he remembered from that devastating meeting. "Marcus Williams, Mum. Thank you for maintaining such a beautiful gallery." Victoria's perfectly manicured hand extended for a handshake that lasted exactly the socially appropriate amount of time, long enough to be polite, short enough to maintain distance. "Victoria Sterling, owner." She studied his face intently, looking for signs of deception. "I couldn't help but notice you spent considerable time examining our collection. Are you a collector yourself?" The question was clearly a test. Marcus could sense the suspicion in her voice. The same tone he'd encountered countless times when people questioned his presence in upscale establishments. It was the voice of someone determining whether he belonged or was simply an intruder in their exclusive world. "I appreciate fine art," he replied carefully. "Your collection is impressive, particularly the MW pieces." Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly. "Yes, those are some of our most valuable works. The artist is quite sought after these days. The prices have increased dramatically over the past few years. We were fortunate to acquire several pieces before his market value exploded. I can imagine. Quality work tends to appreciate in value." Indeed, Victoria paused, studying Marcus's face with the intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle. "You know, it's interesting. You seem quite knowledgeable about contemporary art. Where did you study?" The question was loaded with assumptions and implications. Marcus had faced variations of it his entire life, the subtle probing to determine his credentials, his right to be in certain spaces, his worthiness to participate in certain conversations. It was code for, "Prove to me that you belong here." "I'm largely self-taught," Marcus replied, maintaining his composure despite the familiar sting of class-based interrogation. "I believe art speaks to people regardless of formal education." Victoria's smile was thin and cold, the expression of someone whose suspicions had been confirmed. How refreshing. "Though I must say, the art world can be quite complex. It takes years of study and experience to truly understand the nuances of valuation and authentication. There are so many factors that casual observers might miss." Rebecca watched the exchange with growing discomfort. She could sense the underlying tension, the way Victoria was interrogating rather than conversing. There was something predatory about her employer's approach, something that made Rebecca want to step protectively closer to Marcus. "Actually," Rebecca interjected, "some of the most insightful commentary about our MW collection has come from visitors without formal art education. Fresh perspectives can be incredibly valuable. Sometimes people who haven't been trained what to think about art can see things that experts miss." Victoria shot Rebecca a sharp look that promised a private conversation later. "Rebecca, why don't you go prepare for tomorrow's installation? I'm sure Mr. Williams can find his way out." The dismissal was clear and deliberately humiliating. Marcus nodded politely, refusing to give Victoria the satisfaction of seeing how her rudeness affected him. "Thank you again for allowing me to view your collection, Ms. Sterling. It's been enlightening." As Marcus walked toward the exit, Victoria turned to David. "I want you to get his license plate number. Run a background check. Something about this whole situation doesn't sit right with me." "Ma'am, with all due respect," the man looked at some paintings and left. "That's what visitors typically do in art galleries. David, I've built this gallery into a multi-million-dollar institution by trusting my instincts. That man was not here as a casual visitor. The way he photographed the pieces, studied the security setup, engaged our staff for information, it's textbook reconnaissance for a major theft." Outside the gallery, Marcus sat in his modest Honda Civic, processing what had just happened. The irony was so bitter, it was almost funny. The woman who'd rejected his work 12 years ago had just treated him like a potential criminal for admiring the very paintings she now sold for millions. His phone buzzed with a text from his lawyer, Richard Goldman. Victoria Sterling's gallery wants to purchase 3 more pieces for their upcoming MW exhibition. They're offering $8.5 million for the collection. They're particularly interested in midnight reflections, urban dreams, and silent conversations. Shall I proceed with negotiations? Marcus stared at the message. Victoria Sterling was so eager to profit from MW's work that she was offering millions for paintings by an artist whose true identity she would never accept. The same woman who'd just questioned his right to be in her gallery was begging to buy his art. Back inside the gallery, Victoria was on the phone with her insurance company. Yes, I want to increase security for the MW collection immediately. I have reason to believe someone may be planning a theft. Ms. Sterling, the insurance agent replied, what evidence do you have of a planned theft? A suspicious individual spent over 30 minutes studying the pieces, photographing them, examining our security measures. He was clearly conducting reconnaissance. Did he attempt to touch any artwork? Make any threats? Behave aggressively towards staff? Victoria paused. Well, no. But I know suspicious behavior when I see it. I've been in this business for 30 years. Ma'am, unless there's concrete evidence of criminal intent. We can't authorize additional security costs based on someone looking at art in an art gallery. That's literally what galleries are for. After hanging up, Victoria turned to Rebecca. What exactly did that man say to you about the MW pieces? Rebecca hesitated, knowing that her answer might affect Marcus in ways she couldn't predict. He seemed genuinely moved by the work, particularly reflections of yesterday. He understood the emotional depth in a way that suggested real appreciation for art. His reactions seemed personal, almost like he had some connection to the work. Or he was identifying the most valuable pieces for theft. Ms. Sterling, I think you might be overreacting. He seemed like a genuine art lover. The way he looked at the paintings, the questions he asked it, all felt authentic. Victoria's face flushed with anger. Rebecca, you're young and naive. You don't understand how the world works. People like that don't just wander into galleries like ours unless they have ulterior motives. The phrase people like that hung in the air like poison. Rebecca felt her stomach turn as she realized what Victoria was really saying. What do you mean, people like that? Rebecca asked quietly. Victoria backpedaled quickly, realizing she'd revealed more of her thinking than intended. I mean suspicious individuals who clearly don't belong in high-end establishments. But the damage was done. Rebecca finally understood what she was witnessing, not security consciousness, but raw prejudice disguised as business acumen. That evening, Marcus sat in his Detroit studio, surrounded by canvases in various stages of completion. His success as MW had allowed him to purchase a beautiful loft space in the revitalized downtown area, where he could create without financial pressure. The space was his sanctuary: high ceilings, north-facing windows that provided perfect natural light, and enough room to work on multiple large canvases simultaneously. His phone rang. It was Richard Goldman, the Chicago lawyer who'd been handling MW's affairs for the past 8 years. Marcus, I just got off the phone with Victoria Sterling herself. She's practically begging for more MW pieces. She's planning a massive exhibition and wants to make it the centerpiece of New York's fall art season. The prestige alone would be worth millions in future sales. What did you tell her? That I'd need to consult with my client. But Marcus, this could be defining. The kind of exhibition that establishes an artist's permanent place in art history. We're talking about the Metropolitan Museum potentially acquiring pieces for their permanent collection. Marcus looked around his studio at the dozens of paintings that would never see the light of day because they bore his real name instead of the anonymous initials that had made him famous. Richard, what would happen if MW decided to reveal his identity? There was a long pause. Richard had managed several artists' careers and understood the complex dynamics of the art market better than most. Honestly, it would depend entirely on who MW turns out to be. If he's the right kind of person, white, educated, from the right background with an interesting biography could increase the value of his work even more. But if he's not what the art world expects, it could be devastating. Collectors can be very particular about the artists they invest in. The next morning, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He called Richard and arranged a meeting at the Sterling Gallery. He was going to reveal his identity, not to Victoria Sterling alone, but to the art world itself. 3 days later, Victoria Sterling was preparing for what she believed would be the most important phone call of her career. Richard Goldman had agreed to arrange a conference call with the mysterious M.W. himself, the first time the artist had ever agreed to speak directly with a gallery owner. Ms. Sterling. Richard's voice came through her speakerphone. I have M.W. on the line. He's expressed interest in discussing your exhibition proposal personally. Victoria's heart raced. This was the moment she'd been working toward for years, direct contact with the most sought-after artist in contemporary art. Mr. M.W., she began, her voice trembling with excitement. It's an honor to finally speak with you. Your work has transformed my gallery into one of the most respected institutions in New York. Thank you, Ms. Sterling. I understand you're interested in featuring my work in a major exhibition. Victoria froze. The voice was familiar, articulate, with a slight Midwestern accent. Where had she heard it before? Yes, absolutely. We're prepared to offer you the most comprehensive showcase of your work ever assembled. The entire gallery would be dedicated to your pieces for 3 months. We're talking about potential sales in excess of $50 million. That's very generous. I have to ask, though, are you certain you want to be associated with my work? Given your particular standards about the kind of people who belong in your establishment, the words hit Victoria like a physical blow. Suddenly, she knew exactly where she'd heard that voice. I'm sorry, I don't understand what you mean, she said, though her voice was beginning to shake. 3 days ago, I visited your gallery as Marcus Williams. You seemed quite concerned about my presence there. Something about people like me not belonging in high-end establishments. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria's face went from red to white to grey as the full magnitude of her mistake became clear. You're M.W.L., she whispered. Marcus Williams. The M.W. whose paintings you've sold for millions while believing that Marcus Williams didn't belong in your gallery. Victoria's world began to collapse around her. Every assumption she'd made, every prejudice she'd acted on, every dismissive comment, all of it had been directed at the very artist who'd made her gallery famous. I had no idea. I never imagined. Of course you didn't. Because you never looked past the color of my skin to see who I actually was. You saw a black man in your gallery and immediately assumed I was planning to steal something. Richard Goldman's voice cut through the tension. Marcus, should I proceed with arranging the exhibition details, or would you prefer to work with a different gallery? Marcus paused, considering his options. He could destroy Victoria Sterling with a single word, expose her prejudice to the art world, and watch her career crumble. Or he could use this moment to create something bigger than revenge. Ms. Sterling, Marcus said finally, I'm willing to move forward with the exhibition, but under certain conditions. Victoria's voice was barely audible. Anything. Please, name your conditions. First, the exhibition will be titled Beyond Assumptions, The Art of Marcus Williams. My real name and story will be prominently featured. Second, 50% of the proceeds will go to a scholarship fund for young artists from underrepresented communities. Third, you will personally write a statement about the importance of looking beyond surface assumptions when evaluating both art and people. Victoria realized she was being offered a chance to transform her worst moment into something meaningful. Yes, I agree to all of that. And Ms. Sterling, I hope this experience teaches you that talent, intelligence, and worth aren't determined by appearance or background. The same man you suspected of planning theft is the artist whose work you've built your reputation on. The exhibition Beyond Assumptions, The Art of Marcus Williams opened 6 weeks later to unprecedented crowds. Victoria Sterling's statement, displayed prominently at the entrance, became one of the most quoted pieces of art criticism that year. As a gallery owner, I believed I could judge people as easily as I judge art. I was wrong. The most profound lesson of my career came when I realized that my assumptions about a visitor said far more about my limitations than his character. Marcus Williams taught me that true vision means seeing beyond the surface in art and in life. Marcus Williams stood in the center of his exhibition, finally able to claim his work openly. The journey from anonymous success to authentic recognition had been painful, but necessary. He'd learned that hiding your identity might protect you from prejudice, but it also prevents you from fully owning your achievements. Victoria Sterling approached him during the opening reception. "Mr. Williams, I owe you an apology that goes far deeper than words can express." Marcus nodded. "We all carry biases, Ms. Sterling. The question is whether we're willing to confront them when they're exposed. Your exhibition has changed more than just my gallery, it's changed me." "That's the power of art," Marcus replied. "It forces us to see things differently." The exhibition broke attendance records and generated over $15 million in sales. Marcus Williams became not just a successful artist, but a voice for change in an industry that had overlooked countless talented individuals because of their backgrounds. Years later, when asked about the incident that changed his life, Marcus Williams would say, "Sometimes the most profound revelations come from our worst assumptions." Victoria Sterling thought she was preventing a theft. Instead, she discovered that the only thing being stolen was opportunity, and she had the power to give it back. If this story of transformation and the power of art to change hearts and minds touched you, remember that every interaction is an opportunity to look beyond our assumptions and see the true masterpiece of human potential that exists in every person we meet.